Let's recap our February sales as a secondhand reseller. It is officially March 1st, which means that February is over. So let's go ahead and go through all of my February sales on all the different platforms that I sell on, see what sold quickly for me, what sold for the highest price for me, and which platforms performed best. If you're new here, hello, my name is Lily. I sell secondhand goods for a living and I absolutely love what I do. I sell on a variety of platforms including Poshmark, eBay, Instagram, my website, and I have an antique booth that I sell in person. I posted videos here on YouTube every Friday about all things reselling content, so from Instagram sales to Poshmark sales to thrift hauls to what's selling best for me. And today we're going to be going over all of my February sales. I have my cup of coffee, I have my research notes, so let's go ahead and get started. First things first, let's go ahead and go through all my different platforms and go through my average sales price and how many items I sold on each platform. When I say average sales price, I'm sure different people do this different ways, but I am taking my gross amount of sales, so whatever my gross number is before fees, before shipping, before cost of goods, before any of that, and dividing that by number of sales that I had on that platform. So this is before any kind of fees or anything. So that's gross divided by number of sales gets you your average sales price. My top two platforms this month were Poshmark and Instagram. My total gross sales were pretty close on the two platforms. But on Poshmark, I had 83 total sales in the month of February, which that's pretty good. That's about 20 sales per week. And my average sales price on these Poshmark orders were $37.70, which I'm very happy with. On Poshmark, I like to have an average sales price of around $35, so to have it at $37.70, I'm very happy with that. And then next I have Instagram. Instagram and Poshmark were pretty tied for me this month. I had about the same amount of gross sales on Poshmark and on Instagram. My Instagram numbers are a little bit harder to track because I include the price of shipping in my sales, and then also a lot of people bundle items, so they'll buy 2 or 3 items in one order, but they're paying for that at one time. So calculating the exact number is a little bit difficult, but I did ship out 72 shipments from Instagram. So on Pirate Ship, I could see how many things I shipped out. It was 72 orders. And then in addition to that, I had 5-ish pickups. So local Oklahoma City girls who come and pick up at my house. And then about 25 of those 77 orders were bundles. So people who purchased 2 or more items. So total, I sold about 100 items on Instagram, and my average sales price was about $32. On Instagram, I tend to sell things a little bit lower than I do on Poshmark. That's kind of my goal, is to price it a more affordable price and move things faster than I do on my other platforms. So I'm totally happy with the average sales price being lower. My next best performing platform was eBay. I had 25 orders on eBay, which is not great, but I'm actually pretty happy with that. And my average sales price was $43.02, which I'm very happy with. I tend to have a lot of low sales on eBay, like things that I just want to move quickly, and the platform fees are so low that I'm okay with that. But I also have really, really high sales on eBay, and I don't have much of that in between. So I guess that I kind of just evened out this month to $43. My next best platform was my antique booth. So I just started this in the middle of January with my mom. So I'm only talking about what my sales were, the items that I had put in there and sold, not any of my mom's. I had 28 sales in my booth, and my average sales price was $21.92. In my booth, I also have a lot of really low items and a lot of really high items, not a ton of that middle range, so I'm happy with $21. And I'm really just now figuring it out, so any kind of sales I'm happy with. And then my last platform was my website. I had 6 orders on my website, and my average sales price was $31.81. Most people who shop from my website are people from Instagram who like something that I have on my Poshmark or eBay, but they order it on my website instead. Half of that profit from my website will be donated to a nonprofit this month, so I'm happy to be able to donate some money over there. And then sometimes I have in-person selling events where I go pop up or go to a market. I didn't have any of those this month, and I actually don't have any of those planned right now. Typically, I do have one of those in February, but not this year. Now let's talk about what my highest sales were on each platform. It's always so interesting to me seeing what sells best and what sells for the highest on which platforms. This month on Poshmark, my highest sale was $150. It was these Lucchese boots. They sold, I think, 2 days after I listed them. I paid up for them. I paid $29.99, and I ended up selling them for $150. Western boots do really, really well for me. I love finding cowboy boots. Lucchese is a great brand to remember, so please write that down. But the boot brands I really keep an eye out for are Lucchese's and Tecovas. There are a bunch of other brands that do well too, like Dan Post, Ariat, and a ton of others. But those two are like the best bolo Western boots, Lucchese and Tecovas. And I actually found 2 pair of Lucchese's this month, but one of them I found last week, and I did not look over them very well before I bought them. And they're 2 different sizes, so that should be an interesting sale. Next up on Instagram, my highest sale were these vintage painter overalls. There are these Dickies overalls that someone had hand painted like art supplies and paintbrushes and paint splatters on, and they were fabulous. They were brand new. I don't think they'd ever been washed. They were in excellent condition, and they were from the 90s. I sold them for $125, and they were actually my first sale on that story sale, so I was very happy with those. Next up on eBay, my highest sale was this 1970s wedding dress. I talked about it before, I love selling vintage wedding dresses, especially when I can model them. This wedding dress was gorgeous. It sold in just a couple of weeks on eBay and it sold for $250. Next up, in my antique booth, I sold this pendant light. It was like a Tiffany style stained glass light that you hung from the ceiling. And it sold, I had it listed for $99, but it was during a sale and it sold for $74.99. And then on my website, my highest sale was this J. Crew blazer. It was the Park blazer in this gorgeous color and it sold for $99. And then I had a lot of other sales that were over $50 to $60. So let's go ahead and go through all of my sales that were over $60 in the month of February. First up, I had this vintage Mexican embroidered jacket. It was a wool jacket that was from the 1950s or 60s. And it had this beautiful embroidery all throughout. It was considered a tourist jacket, and they're very popular and desirable online. I had this in my antique booth, and it didn't sell, so while it was getting warmer, I decided to go ahead and put it on Poshmark. It sold in about 2 weeks for $100. Next up was this Reformation dress. It was the Hattie dress. It was like a flannel kind of material, but it was a summery dress. I had it listed at $150, I want to say, and someone sent me an offer for $100, and I accepted that, and it took about a month to sell. Next up was this Rhode dress. It was the Ella dress in this really rare print. Rhode is a great brand to remember, R-H-O-D-E. This was the first dress that I had ever had from them. I had never found the brand before. I visited New Orleans in September and I got it at a bicycle trade store there. I think I paid up for it like $25 and it sold for $125 in a few months. Next up was this Mara Hoffman blazer. I actually just got it pretty recently at a Goodwill. It was like a linen blazer that tied in the front, a cropped kind of style, and it sold for $75 on Poshmark. Next up was a new to me brand. It was this Catwise jacket. Catwise, I guess, is a small business that upcycles and creates like one-of-a-kind pieces. It was this wool patchwork jacket and it sold for $70 on Poshmark. Next up was this Anthropologie jumpsuit. I had this in one of my thrift hauls along with that Reformation dress. It was a very new style and it had these wide legs with a deep V and it sold for $60 on Poshmark pretty quickly. Next up was this Patagonia Deep Pile vest. I guess Deep Pile is a line of Patagonia that was pretty rare and desirable. It was just a very plain gray vest. Some Patagonia is so desirable. This one sold for $60. When it comes to Patagonia, not all of it is worth paying up for, but some of it is. I have a couple of Patagonia pieces on this list. Especially any of their chinchillas in a really rare print are going to do great, so make sure to look up comps whenever you find Patagonia. Next up were these YSL sneakers. They were Yves Saint Laurent sneakers that I got at a thrift store probably 2 or 3 years ago. I had them for a long time. They were a style that I couldn't find any comps on, and I wasn't for sure if they were men's or women's because they had both sizes. So it took a little bit for them to sell, but they sold for $60 on Poshmark. I know that I probably could have gotten more eventually, but I was okay with just taking the sale. Next up was this Marie Oliver dress. This was my first time with this brand. I also got that in New Orleans when I was there in September, and it sold for $70 on Poshmark. Next up on eBay, I sold these Figs Star Wars pants. All Figs do pretty well and sell pretty quickly, but I guess that they have certain lines that are very popular, including the Star Wars line. I ended up finding a pair of this Star Wars pants, I think 2 weeks ago, and then I got a Star Wars beanie last week. The pants sold for $69 on eBay. Next up were these Cami NYC joggers. This was a new to me brand too. I found it a few months ago at a thrift store. It's an all silk piece. All their items are high-end materials and a lot of them are silk. They have a lot of like delicate pieces, like obviously Cami NYC, tops, robes, pants, pretty basic pieces, and these sold for $60 on eBay. Next up was this Hill House nap dress and it sold on Instagram and it sold for $89. This was from the same haul as that Reformation dress and that Anthropologie jumpsuit. It was the Ellie nap dress and it was in a rare tartan plaid print. Hill House does a lot of limited release patterns and styles, so if you can find one of the rare ones, it does really well. Next up was another J. Crew blazer. This one sold on Instagram and it sold for $75. It was the same style as that one that sold for $99, but it was a different color. And then lastly on Instagram was this Patagonia Sherpa jacket. It sold for $65. It was the Los Gatos style and it was a Sherpa material. The Sherpa ones do pretty well for me, and that one is like a timeless kind of style. And I had that listed on Poshmark and on Instagram, but it's sold on Instagram. So those were all of my high dollar sales. Now let's talk about my quick sales, the things that are flipping really fast for me. Some of these are specific items that I sold, and some of them are just like a generalization of a brand and style that sold for me. First up, Judy Blue jeans. I was a Judy Blue hater for a long time, but I recently started picking them up, especially in good styles, and they sell for me almost always within a day or two. Specifically, I sold a pair of bootcut jeans this month and they sold super quickly, and then last month I sold a pair of like bell bottoms. They sold super fast. Next up, vintage wedding dresses. I'm selling those like hotcakes. It is wedding season. A lot of people are getting engaged and getting married, so wedding dresses are doing really well. Anything bridal or bachelorette is doing well. I sold a bride sweatshirt on Instagram, and then I sold a vintage wedding dress on eBay, and last month I sold 2 more vintage wedding dresses. So any kind of vintage wedding dress or just bridal thing in general, I would pick up. Next up, Universal Standard pants. I found several pair of Universal Standard trousers at a Goodwill a few weeks ago, and I sold all but I think 1 or 2 pairs. So I sold like 4 pairs really quickly on Poshmark within a couple of weeks. Next up, Patagonia vests. That Patagonia vest that I had sold really quickly, and then I had one last month too that also sold really quickly. So I'm definitely still picking those up for spring. Next up, I don't know if this one was a fluke or if it was a specific style that I had or if it's all Cotopaxi, but this Cotopaxi jacket sold within the same day for me. I had never found this brand before, but they also have bags. So bags and jackets, and I would definitely suggest picking it up because it sold quickly. Next up, Abercrombie dresses, especially special occasion dresses. I had a white Abercrombie dress sell on Poshmark and a pink one sell on Instagram, and they both sold very quickly and had a lot of demand. Especially with these puff sleeves and midi length, that's very popular right now. Next up, this one was kind of random to me, but I had 2 pair of newer style Pilcro jeans by Anthropologie, and they both sold very quickly. I had one that was like a cargo style in a plus size, and then I had a different one that was a wide leg style in a smaller size, and both of them sold within a few days. Next up, Dojo jeans by Seven for All Mankind. I thought that these were not still popular, but I had gone to Nordstrom Rack a few weeks ago to pick up something, and they had a whole section for Dojo jeans, and so I was like, maybe they still do well. Coincidentally, a couple days later, I found a few pairs on a new rack at a thrift store, and I picked them up, and I think it was 2 pairs. They both sold within 2 days. And then I just picked up another pair and they already have a lot of likes. So I definitely suggest still getting Dojo jeans. Other Seven for All Mankind doesn't do very well for me, but the Dojo jeans do really well. And how you can know they're Dojos, A, it'll say it on the inside, but B, on the back it has a 7 on the pocket. And so anything that has 7 on the pocket by Seven for All Mankind, I suggest picking up because they're selling quickly. Next up, Vuori. I don't find Vuori very often, but I had 2 pieces this month. One of the jackets that I got sold the next day, and it sold for a pretty good price. I want to say $55. And then I also sold the sweatshirt within a week, so Vuori is selling very quickly. Next up, I had a Smartwool t-shirt. I always love finding Smartwool, but this t-shirt specifically sold within a couple days. It doesn't sell for very much money, but it always sells quickly, so I suggest picking it up. And lastly, a piece that sold really quickly for me were a pair of Teva platform sandals. They were the Zamora sandals, I want to say. These sold on eBay within a day. I had never seen this style before, but they sold super quickly and had a lot of demand on both Poshmark and eBay when I listed them. So I definitely suggest looking at Teva platform sandals. So those were all things that sold quickly for me, but now let's just go over some general trends that I'm seeing and things that are selling for me across all different platforms. February and March is kind of strange when it comes to selling secondhand items and honestly selling clothing in general because it's not really still winter and it's not really yet spring. People don't want to still be buying winter things even though it's cold. People aren't really ready to buy spring because it's still cold. So there's not a great set hard and fast rule that things are selling specifically. I've sold a lot of sweaters and jackets and also a lot of tops and dresses, and so it's a little bit of everything. But a few trends that I have been seeing a lot of. A, pajamas and loungewear matching sets are still doing great for me on both Poshmark and Instagram. I sold a lot of pajama sets, lounge sets, especially any kind of Free People dupe is doing great for me. On Poshmark, I sold these J. Crew pajamas almost instantly for $30. And then on Instagram, I've sold these matching lounge sets really well too. Next up, people are starting to shop for special occasions. So in the spring, people have a lot of banquets, graduation, weddings to go to. So I've been selling a lot of special occasion dresses. In the tags in Poshmark, I like to add things like graduation, bachelorette, banquet, specific tags for things that people might be shopping for because they might search in the search bar or in Google like banquet dress or graduation dress. So hopefully that'll pop up. I've been selling a lot of special occasion dresses. Also, any kind of athleisure has been very popular for me, whether it's leggings or sneakers or just any kind of athleisure is doing really well. Most of my vintage doesn't ever make it to Poshmark. Most of it stays on Instagram and sells there. But a lot of colorful sweaters are doing well for me. Graphic tees, so any kind of vintage graphic tee. A great way to know if it's vintage, A, is if the tag is paper instead of silky, and B, if it's single stitch, so on the sleeve or on the hem, if the stitching is one single line instead of 2. That's a great way to know if it's vintage. Vintage sweatshirts and t-shirts and sweaters do great for me right now, especially with funky graphics or with collegiate or location graphics. So if it's like, for me, living in Oklahoma, I find a lot of OU or OSU stuff, and then also whether it's like New York or Hilton Head or Seattle or wherever it is, different location graphic tees and sweatshirts do well for me. And then let's talk about what trends as a whole that I'm seeing, not necessarily selling or finding, but just things that I'm seeing that I know will be popular soon. I love to watch trends on Pinterest and TikTok. I love fashion, watching that kind of stuff. A few things that are coming back into style to start thinking about for March. I know you hate to hear it, but low-rise jeans are making a comeback. A lot of Gen Z is starting to wear lower-rise jeans. So historically, people have told you not to pick up low-rise and mid-rise, and a lot of people are still wearing high-rise, including me. But low-rise and mid-rise is making a comeback, so any kind of Y2K jean or low-rise jean is doing well. But I would still stick to the boot cut or wide leg or flare fits. Skinny jeans aren't quite back yet, so I would still stick to the more wide leg fits, but a lower rise is not something that you have to stay away from. Next up, with that drop waist dresses are still in. One of those Abercrombie dresses that I sold was a drop waist style, like the 20s style that came back in the 80s. That is definitely still in, and people are starting to shop that for wedding dresses and special occasion dresses, so don't stay away from that either. I've also been seeing a lot of loafers, whether it's a flat classic style loafer or a chunky loafer. A little bit of everything is in. Loafers, and then also ballet flats. Ballet flats are still in, especially the mesh ones, like the 2000 style see-through mesh ballet flats are very popular right now. I talked about this one before, but a lot of the button front cardigan sweaters are doing really well for me. A lot of people are wearing them buttoned or just buttoning the top one. So any kind of like 2000 style cardigan like that, or a preppy style cardigan like if it has the gold buttons, or if you find sweater sets. So this morning I bought a Pendleton sweater set that was like a tank and a cardigan over it that match. That kind of stuff's doing really well for me on Instagram, and I'm seeing it all over TikTok and on Pinterest. Also a lot of feminine styles, so like baby pinks and florals, ruffles. That kind of stuff is really popular right now, especially with that wedding season and banquet season coming up. This one has been around a while, but especially right now I've been seeing it a lot with Olivia Rodrigo being on tour. She wears a lot of slip dresses, whether it's mini or midi as dresses, and I've been selling those really well on Instagram, and I also have been seeing them a lot on TikTok and on Pinterest. So keeping an eye out for vintage slips does really well. Of course, like Victoria's Secret slips do great, Victoria's Secret Gold Label does great, but also just any kind of vintage slip that's a cool style and good condition does great. Something else I've been seeing a lot on TikTok and on Pinterest is these charm necklaces, like the 80s and 90s styles charm necklaces that people are making them. So like a gold chain with any kind of fun charms on them is very, very popular right now, so if you can find any of those, that should do great. As for home goods, maximalism is definitely in. A lot of Gen Z and millennials are starting to do lots of colorful, mixed-matched, non-necessarily aesthetic or traditionally minimalist styles. So a little bit of everything is what people are shopping for. And then this has been around for a while, but streetwear and workwear is still very popular. Carhartt, Harley, Dickies, any of those kinds of brands that are traditionally more manly and workwear brands, a lot of Gen Z and millennials are wearing just out and about. So if you can find Carhartt jackets or any kind of workwear like that, it's going to do really well. And honestly, the more distressed and the more worn, the better. In my antique booth, I've noticed that the younger people like me are shopping for a lot of colorful, fun pieces. And then of course the classic things like vintage Pyrex are of course always going to be popular. In our antique booth, we've also been selling a lot of vintage patches and buttons. I've seen that a lot too on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest. A lot of people are using vintage patches to put on their jackets or on even their shoes, and I feel like that's going to be pretty trendy coming into the spring. But overall, I guess that my insights from February are: A, it is fun to sell those high dollar sales, and they definitely bring up my average sales price and help me out. However, the things that are selling the best for me are those bread and butter brands like Abercrombie, J. Crew, Anthropologie, Free People, and then even brands that aren't necessarily as fun for me like Talbots and Spanx or Torrid. Those aren't brands I necessarily get excited to find, but they still do very, very well, and that's what's paying my bills. And then also, we need to keep getting ready for spring because spring is coming. I always post any kind of season. Anything that I find, I post it right then and there. I don't save it unless it's like a special holiday item. But make sure to be shopping for dresses and transitional sweaters, tank tops and tops, shorts and skirts. The season for those is definitely coming, so go ahead and start picking them up now while you can and get them listed because people are shopping for them. I think that is everything for my February sales recap. Thank you so much for being here, and please let me know how your February sales were. Mine were pretty on par for a February. February is not ever really my highest sales month, so I'm pretty happy with how February sales were for February. I had a really low December and January, and so I was happy to get that back up. But let me know how yours were. And also, I'm thinking about doing a Q&A video either next week or the week after, so please comment down below any questions that you have for me about me personally or my business or anything else that you have. I'd love to answer some questions and help you out because I've been getting a lot of comments, which I'm so thankful for, but I'm not always able to answer all of them thoroughly. So please let me know any questions that you have down in the comments. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. I post new videos about reseller content every Friday, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss those. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for being a part of a little bit of my closet.